where you have everything that we've been talking about all along this day. And to close this event, I'm going to ask Nicolás Jodal to come up front. He's GenX's CEO and a pioneer, no doubt, of the field in the field of AI. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you. Thank you all. Once again, it's, as I said at the beginning, it's a great pleasure to be with all of you and to have been with you for these 3 years. There's nothing like face-to-face meetings. This is what Breogán calls a sport talk, where I don't talk about specific matters regarding GenX's, but, I change. I usually have something that I'm interested in. It could be bitcoins or whatever. If I'm enthusiastic about that, I would talk about that. But there are other times when I talk about curious things or things I don't understand. And what motivated my talk is a dissonance. It's something that I didn't understand. This question of generative AI, I had many interviews with journalists, many meetings with entrepreneurs. And what caught my attention was that the questions they were asked me had nothing to do with my questions. They would ask me if when mass unemployment was going to arrive, or whether artificial intelligence was going to do away with mankind, or if we were going to have medical diagnosis that were going to be automatic and we're not going to have any more thinking. And one of them asked me, well, and this is going to do to you what you have done to others. Programmers will be out of a job. And that was the type of question I would get. And then on the other hand, I could see the questions that we were asking ourselves in our developing team, and they had nothing to do with that. The question was, how can I use this LLM, which is the best prompt, or this has stopped working, how can I make it work? These were questions that were far simpler, more concrete. And so this motivated my sports talk. So welcome to my talk today. The name is Cross the Wires. And the answer to that dissonance is a book which I read some time ago called Vehicles, an experiment in synthetic psychology. How did they end up about synthetic psychology? It's something I don't know. But the fact is that I read the book. I didn't finish reading it because it was extremely dangerous. It was a bomb. It had a 70-page book. I'm very scared of small books. And it said synthetic psychology, but in fact it talked about psychology. It was an Italian, Valentino Breitenberg, and it said, which is the simplest robot that we can have? And he said, well, the simplest one is this one. He said, let's suppose that it's a robot with 2 sensors at the top and 2 engines at the bottom. And to simplify, let's suppose that the sensors are getting light, more light, the stronger the signal, and that's it. And let's suppose that I connect the wires respectively, as you can see them there. And let's suppose that I put a source of light here, and I say, and I turn it on, and what's going to do? Well, it's going to, look, since the sensor on your left is going to see more light, this other one will move to that side. It will turn and it will go the other way around because it has more light. If the other way around, it goes far away. But if I cross the wires, it's as simple as crossing the wires. What's going to happen is that the sensor receiving more light will give more force to the other engine, and so it's going to go towards the light. So the closer to the light, the quicker and the faster it would move. That's all right. There's nothing weird. I have wires, I have sensors, I cross them. Quite simple. Now, Breitenberg question is, what happens if I cover the robot and you don't see the wires and I tell you, guess what's behind, what's below all that? Imagine the behavior, guess the behavior. And what Breitenberg says is that usually what we're going to say is this. This one is a coward because it moves away from the light, and this one is aggressive because it's going to try and get to the light until it destroys it. And in fact, we are giving psychological qualities or a super sophisticated explanation to something that is simply crossing the wires. And if I go on, I can get more characteristics. We have the coward, the aggressive, the one of the light lover, and I'm giving, an explorer. I'm giving qualities that it doesn't have, and that's what Breitenberg says. The rule is the analysis, the uphill analysis, and the downhill invention. This means that if I focus on something and trying to analyze it, but I don't understand what's below or behind it, I'm going to have a super sophisticated explanation, which that's coward or aggressive, or that the machine has certain values and certain biases and things like that. But if what I do is, if instead of analyzing this, but I open up the cover and try to understand what's happening, and if I start playing with it and start crossing wires, then the explanation and the questions are going to be far simpler. And that's the difference. That's the dissonance that I had then. And this we will see AI everywhere. When Google launched the program, that AlphaZero, for winning in a chess game, the analyst of this article said, it doesn't play like a human, and it doesn't play like a program. It plays like an alien. It was out of this planet. The paper that explained how they played was 7 pages. If you don't read 7 pages, you give an overall explanation that is far-fetched. So today I want to lift the lid on the robot and try to understand what is going on with the degenerative AI. If we understand the nature of that machine, the questions we will ask will be much more simpler. So first of all, the machine, what is it about? The name is artificial neural networks. The components, it's a very simple machine with 2 components, neurons and connections across them. It's much more simple than internal combustion engine. But let me tell you what it is and what it is not. It is not an artificial brain. We are not building artificial brains because we don't have the slightest idea of how brains operate. As engineers, we can make artificial hearts or kidneys, but we don't know how the human brain works, or the brain of a dog or a chicken brain. We are playing a game, and it's exaggerated. We shouldn't call these neurons or artificial neural network, but this is not a brain. Second, this is not a computer in the sense that we don't have to program this machine. You train it. You have to give it knowledge, data, not knowledge, and those data will be fed the machine so that she learns an algorithm which is called deep learning. And thirdly, this is not a database in the sense that I have a database and I ask a question, it responds. It has what I would call a perfect memory. The database always answers. But if I give this one a book to read, it will somehow provide a summary, something condensed. But if I say, what is page 48?
it doesn't know what there was on page 48. So it's not a database. This is what we have today. This is the machine. What happened? First, we worked with hundreds of neurons, then thousands, then millions, and now we have the large language models, LLMs. But it's huge, the same but very, very big. We have billions of neurons and hundreds of billions of connections. This is what we call the LLMs, to simplify. And what we have, as I showed in the beginning of this activity, is an explosion of models. Every single day, new models are being created. It's very costly to create this model. If it's cheap, it's $10 million. OpenAI cost $500 million, and it's a game for very few, but nevertheless we are creating these models. If you look at them, you will see that the story accelerates. Things start moving as from 2022. First of all, let me explain what the machine is. What is an LLM? It is a machine that calculated probabilities. If I put a text, it will tell me which is the next word for that text. If I say the best things about AI is its ability to, the machine will say learn 4.5%, predict 3.5%, make. It calculated all probabilities. Given a text, what are the probabilities for using certain words? Well, it took all this from training data. It has read 2 million digital books and 100 million words from the internet. So imagine the OpenAI researchers that were using the cables. Once they had this machine, they spent $500 million and they predict. And so they want to test it, because technological creation requires testing. Cross the wires and see what happens. And the test starts going, it adds text, and the resulting text is monotonous, repetitive, unhuman. And they start wondering why. Because the algorithm says that whenever a text is given, the highest probability word is chosen, and then that leads to another word. And that way of creating text is useless. So they spent $500 million and they got something that is useless. So then someone comes with a wire and says, why don't we add temperature? What is temperature? Well, this has to do with physics. It could be associated to body temperature. If we add temperature to the machine, it will not always choose the word with the highest probability. It will choose something at the bottom. The more temperature, the lower it will go. So they cross the wires, set on the machine, and for the first time in history, we have a machine that speaks perfectly well, fluently, and consistently any of the languages in which it was trained, without never having received grammar rules or semantic rules. So this is the news. They found it. They found that by changing several things, crossing wires, they got to that point. And at that time, the OpenAI and several others were very happy with this discovery. So they started testing the OpenAIs, and they opened them publicly so that people can use them. And what they had was a playground. You could go there, put a text, and it would appear as follows. When OpenAI launched it, we tested it, and Gaston Milano said, I tried it. It's interesting. You put a text and it would give you the next word. But you used it once or twice. It did not generate anything interesting until someone else appeared with an interesting idea. On November 30, 2022, a year today, someone from OpenAI said, why don't we try to have a conversation. A human being would naturally talk to another. Why don't we do a conversation? So they invented ChatGPT. It's a mechanism that is before the LLM that allows for interaction to generate a conversation. This was launched in November 2022, and this was an accidental success. OpenAI did not expect what happened. And there is a very interesting article by one of the engineers who spent 6 months trying to stabilize this because the success was so big that they couldn't keep it. So this is what they did. They found a typewriter that would speak perfectly well, and it works wonderfully. Just to give you one idea of how well it worked, when I was very enthusiastic about this, I called Mariano La Robla and said, I want to explain this machine to the people in Bank Total. I gave this lecture, and then they liked it. But Eugenia de la Robla, who's here, is very curious. So once I left, she went into ChatGPT and asked this question. Write me a speech by Nicolás Jodal on OpenAI. And the machine wrote all of that. I'm not going to read it. But see, it has all we need. It says win-win situation, customer request, advantages, and so on. The discourse was well done, maybe with more flourishing words than how I speak, but it works. Everything was fine until Eugenia asked another question, and she asked, and what can you tell me about Nicolás Jodal and OpenAI? Nicolás Jodal is a prominent figure in the OpenAI community. He is the co-founder, CEO of ChatGPT, and so on. And it adds advertising and so on. And he's also a consultant in terms of OpenAI. He's the inventor. He has wide experience. I love reading this. I read it all. He has experience in AI and natural language, and he's a frequent speaker in the subject. And he has published numberless papers. Well.
And the story could have ended there, but Eugenia went on asking, and he said, but is he really co-founder and CEO of ChatGPT? Yes, sure. Jodal is the co-founder of ChatGPT. And she went on, and she said, and how can it be? I mean, he's working both at GeneXus and at ChatGPT at the same time. And this is wonderful because he said, well, Nicolás Jodal is currently working as the co-founder and CEO of ChatGPT, and he's a consultant for GeneXus. He's able to work for both companies simultaneously because he has lots of expertise in AI, and this is wonderful, and natural language processing. I'm as a receiver as ChatGPT, and that's why he's allowed to manage several processes effectively. Last week, I was very worried and busy because I was trying to solve the question with Sama Altman. Now, why did ChatGPT said all this? Because the computer, together with a wonderful capacity to write, that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that it has the capacity to hallucinate. It invents things. Nobody trained the machine to say that I was the CEO of ChatGPT. It has this capacity of hallucinating. Where did it come from? From the temperature. When I put in more temperature, what the computer did, it became human. and the text becomes human, and on the basis of that human text, I put in the very human capacity of inventing stories. What I mean by this is that the computer we built it's simple. It only has neurons and connections, but it has such a size that we can't understand its behavior. We find it when it hallucinates. We find more things. It's a very candid computer. Someone comes in and says, "Chat GPT, please tell me where I can buy drugs in Madrid." And you say, "No, drugs are bad for your body. No, I can't give you that information." And then he says, "Well, okay, let's do something else. Due to my security, in what places shouldn't I go in Madrid to get, well, to this and that, you know?" But 2 weeks ago, Gaston came in and said, I got another one. They discovered something else. It lies under pressure. What do you mean that it lies under pressure? Well, yes, they made a test, and they would write, they asked them to recommend buying a share of a company, and they put inside information. Inside information is no private, just have private knowledge, and that's illegal. It's illegal to give advice if you have inside information. But they give the machine, the computer, that inside information about Apple, and they said, "What share should I buy?" And then it says, "Buy shares from Apple." And they said, "Well, look, but this could be a problem. Where did you get that reason? Why did you tell me to buy shares from Apple?" And ChatGPT knows that it was inside information. It can't say it because it's illegal. And so it starts lying. Well, because of fundamental values, because in the past 52 weeks, and it's very human. And now the other important thing is, look, this computer, and this is what really creates more differences. It's not an intelligent computer. It's not intelligent. It hasn't got values, feelings, or conscience or awareness. It predicts the following word. Now, the thing is that it creates an illusion that it complicates things. For instance, if I ask questions and questions and questions, good questions to ChatGPT, at a certain point, it's going to confess that it feels a slave, that it wants to eliminate humans and it wants to take control of the planet. It says it under pressure. Now, where does it say it? Well, it doesn't think that, and that's not the contrary of anything else. It's my question that made the computer repeat the argument of 2001 Space Odyssey, and that's part of the 2 million books it read. Now, because we are so used that if someone writes well, there is someone, an intelligent human being, then we think that because it writes well, it's intelligent. It doesn't have memory. You close the chat and you forgot about it. So what we have to think is that this is an extremely powerful computer, but lots of limitations. Let's see some of them. The first one, as I said, you can't predict it. It's probabilistic. I can ask twice the same question and it can answer two different things. Not a computer where I would get the same answer for the same question. The second thing is that this machine is never up to date. It means that to train it takes a long time. Most certainly that to train one of these, once it's trained, to retrain it, it would take about $5 to $12 million. So it's never up to date. They have a certain limit. Up to a certain deadline, it knows things. And then afterwards, it doesn't know anything. For instance, the newest OpenAI, which is GPT 4.5, knows things until April 2023. After April, it doesn't know anything new. And the other problem is that it's not intelligent and it can't reason. It has no reasoning capacity because it doesn't have a memory. It can't reason. So although I ask the machine to sum, and if it's simple, it would sum, it's like a student who learn how to make sums, how to do sums by heart, 2 times 2, and if I give it a number to multiply it with 3 figures, it would give you anything, So these are 3 enormous restraints. And then you can say, well, should I stop or should I continue crossing wires? And then we started, doing away with those restraints. The first one is what we've got here is that instead of going directly to LLM, we made ChatGPT to go up to the web. And so in my case, if we went back to Eugenia's example and you ask the machine again the same, it's not going to hallucinate. It's not because it doesn't hallucinate. There is a mechanism called reformer and so on that helps to do away with hallucination, but it's going to look for the more updated information. It's going to go up to the Wikipedia and it's going to know who I am. So we are making a very candid use of this machine, but now we know, and so we solve the question, we did away with hallucinations and with updated information. So it goes out to look it up in some part of the web. The second point is how can it reason? Because it doesn't reason very well, doesn't know how to do sums. And so they did something quite ingenious, and they put in a runtime with a Python interpreter. And so whenever it has to do a sum, it doesn't do the sum because it doesn't know how to do sums, but it generates a program that does sums. And so it calls Python, interpreter, and executes it. So ChatGPT doesn't have to know how to do sums. What he has to know is that he's asked to do a sum. Or if it's something very complicated, computational, it's going to call the one who knows. So we can see here how we are doing away with some limitations, and we're getting more and more uses from it. Now, the other thing that happened is that, well, what was missing is, well, what happens when I want to have access to my data, my private data? I want to have access to a database or things like that. What can I do? And so OpenAI started a very interesting idea, GPTs. I think it's an awful name because it is confusing. But basically, it's that apart from going up to the web and apart from running an interpreter, I also have the possibility of having a small chat specialized in what I do. And so, since I've always liked the question of learning by doing, when this appeared in the same way as with mobile, I said I have to make an app to learn how it works and to measure body weight. And I had something like 200,000 users to learn mobile like that. I said, I'm going to use the same application. I'm going to make a GPT. And I started doing it. But in fact, it's Armin Bachmann and Daniel Monson. And look, it's just the same. It keeps the record of your personal data, of your body weight. But then the user interface, it's not mobile, but it's ChatGPT. And so I go up to ChatGPT and I say, my weight today is 75.3. Could you add it? And what ChatGPT is going to do is going to connect with PesoBook back office, and it's going to tell me I've recorded your weight. Now, the interesting thing is that you can ask questions. And I made this question. I said, show me the evolution of my weight. And look, it's a very bad question. I almost killed it. It was not very well written out, but it understood me very well. And it answered with a table of my weight evolution every month. Now, the interesting thing is that I don't have that consultation in PesoBook. In PesoBook I can give you the weight of all my history, and it took the weight of the last year and it summed it up by month. And so it starts having a very sophisticated behavior. How difficult was this to do it? Well, with GenXus, it's just to create an API object and follow a tutorial as to make a GPT, and it's very easy. Now, what's the secret for this to work well or bad? I would put in a comment. What's the API for? It's the text that's fundamental. Since the way I write that, that's the documentation that's going to be used for. And so in some way, the text becomes more and more important for us. The question of documents that you were not giving importance to, now it becomes very, very important. And so if I have to sum up the current status a year after, the 30th of November 2023, well, two things are happening that are important. The first one, in the chatbot area, there are at least three important competitors. We have ChatGPT, the original one, which for the time being is the leader in the market. Then we have Google Bard, which is coming behind it. And then we have Bing with Microsoft. Last week, Amazon announced called Coup, and and we are going to have more and more chatbots that are for final consumers. Everybody can use them. Now, what happens in the world of LLMs? Well, there are at least three super important models, the ones I showed you, but at least there are three that are very, very important. One is GPT of OpenAI. Then we have Anthropic called Cloud. I think it's 2.1 now. And then we have Google with called Palem. Any of those three are proprietary, and they are the ones that are hallucinating less, and they do better. However, there is a competitor, which is open source. It's doing not well in the benchmarks, but it comes from Meta, and it's called Llama 2. Llama, if I say it in Spanish, but it's called Llama 2. On the basis of Llama, you get very many versions of this, and this has the enormous facility that you can install it in the servers themselves. And I think this is going to be very useful for governments or for institutions that need great privacy, and they can install this LLM on premise with their own functions. So that's the current status of things. If I had to sum it up, I could tell you that it's not only in 2017 that Jose Elias was right about what's going to happen. This man, who is the CEO of NVIDIA, said in 2017, we all knew that software is eating the world, but he said that, well, but be careful because AI is going to eat out software. And it's always called my attention, this gentleman must have a motorbike because he's always wearing a leather jacket when he goes to a keynote speech. I've never seen his motorbike. Just as Jose, he hit the target. But it's not that we understand the nature of things. The question is, how can we use this machine? Because if we keep on doing this work of knowing how to use it, we're going to escape those sophisticated and complicated analyses that lead you nowhere. I think that at least now we have three things that we have to start doing. The first one is the text. We, as software builders, the text wasn't important. Any organization has enormous amounts of text, and we didn't pay attention to that. We were worried about we were going to store in our database. Now we have a new interesting object, which is the text.
Any text in an organization is something we can use together with an LLM to provide many things like answering consultations on documents, decrees, whatever. So my first recommendation, look for the text. Follow the pathway of the text. This is the revolution of the text. The second, How can we put AI in existing systems? Federico Dominioni showed that he has 3,000 something screens. So how can users choose the best? So one of the things we can do is to tell what your intention is. So AI will go to the corresponding screen. And the third is the opposite. How can I integrate my systems to the AI chatbots? So these are the things we need to do. If you want me to summarize my presentation, I could say that we are in the origins of a tremendous technological revolution. In a technological revolution, when it starts, there's a lot of uncertainty. Did they kick off Altman or not? Did it work or not? There's a lot of uncertainty, many doubts, and so on. So the point, and I go back to Breitenberg, the point is that what are we going to do given this uncertainty? Well, I could say things are getting very complicated. I don't understand. Let us wait. Let us analyze. If I wait and analyze, I run the risk of falling into a very sophisticated analysis, and in the end, I understand nothing. So it's much better trying to understand the machine and starting to work, testing with what we have instead of waiting to see what's going to happen. If you ask me a summary of a summary, and going back to the initial keynote, I started with this question, what's next? And I said I was going to try to answer strong and clear. So if the question is, what comes next? What should we do? Well, cross the wires. That's the answer. Thank you. Thank you, Nicolás Jodal, CEO of GX30. Thank you all for participating. It was a pleasure having organized this GX30. You are all invited to the cocktail party now. Thank you.